Broadcasting on Radio Star Worldwide. It's Adventure CEO Leadership Insights. Welcome to the adventure of your lifetime. Entrepreneurial life. A modern-day adventurer, continually expanding opportunities for your family, team, and community. Working hard to build your business, delivering more value to win customers, overcoming crushing disappointment to create soaring victories. A journey only truly understood by other entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host for Adventure CEO Leadership Insights, Jeffrey Wolfe.
Welcome back, entrepreneurs. Welcome to Adventure CEO Leadership Insights, your weekly meeting with high-performing entrepreneurs, CEOs, and modern-day adventurers. This week, I've got a question for you. What do Celine Dion, Cirque du Soleil, and the United Nations have in common? Well, here's the answer. They've all sought out the coaching and guidance of our guest today, an amazing, amazing entrepreneur. Please welcome Leena Patel.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Leena. I mean, you just have an incredible background. You know, you're known as the number one in the world at Global Impact Systems. You've had just an incredible journey to where you're at today. You know, just one of the things that amazed me is that you were mentored by your grandfather, who was a direct disciple of Mahatma Gandhi. Yes, from your childhood. So you've just been involved in leadership from a very early age.
I was, yeah. So you're absolutely right. From the age of 4, I was mentored by both my grandparents, but my grandfather in particular. And so a lot of, I'd say, Gandhi's influence in terms of activism, to standing up for your truth, leading a movement, but doing it in a really peaceful way with real concern for humanity, for human rights in a non-violent way, has embedded itself. And it's really the springboard for everything that I create and do in the world today, in my business and outside as well.
Well, you have a very rare combination of entrepreneurship, sports, arts, and activism. How did that all come about?
So the leadership, there's sort of coupled with, I would say, kind of spiritual training, spiritual inclination. That came from my grandparents. That's sort of embedded in my family. The sports came from, I've got a background. So yoga has been a big part of my life. That was part of my upbringing as well. So I taught it. I've been teaching it for 20 years. I trained as a professional dancer, as an athlete. So that's my initial
my gosh.
Board. So I got to I've worked with incredible athletes over my life, some gymnasts, some synchronized swimmers, golfers. I trained Cirque du Soleil for a number of years. So I've got to work with some incredible people. Now I take those sort of principles of high performance of sports into the business realm to show leaders, like, how do we step up our game and play at that level of elite.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you mentioned professional dancing, the first image that comes to mind is a poster that I've seen that shows the feet of a ballerina, one with their shoe on, one with their shoe off. And it talks about the whole theme is that, are you willing to pay the price for that level of performance?
So, yeah, my feet for years were mauled up, bunions. I mean, it's horrible. Those blisters, bleeding from being in point shoes, from training, grueling every single day. Softened up a little bit now that I'm retired, but still, like, it just, every time I look at them, it's just a reminder of the hours and hours of work it takes to be at that level. And I remember meeting Mikhail Baryshnikov, if anyone listening. Really? One of the most incredible male performers, athletes, dancers in the world today. And I remember seeing, it was a rehearsal studio in New York, and I watched this very young. I remember before I'd even sort of, people had talked about this incredible, the legend that he was, and it never really registered until I met him in person. And the aura that he had, he just emanated just presence and power just in his, not really that tall, maybe a little couple of inches, maybe 5'6" or something. I'm not sure how tall he is, but
oh wow.
But not tall at all, but the power and the presence that he generated. And if you just look down and see his feet, if you look at his, perfectly shaped, everything was just chiseled immaculately, but the feet tell the tale of the work, the thousands and thousands of hours it took to achieve that level of mastery. That all of a sudden you get on stage and you wow the world with just one turn.
Wow, that the feet tell the tale of the work. Yeah. That's a great insight from professional dance. Now, do you see that apply in the business world as well? I mean, could you share that and maybe another insight that you've gotten from transitioning from athletics to business?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll share a couple, actually. One is a personal lesson that I learned when I first started training later than my peers. For a professional athlete, for gymnasts, you're starting when you're 4 or 5 years old. I started when I was 13, which is very late.
Wow.
So I figured, but I was so determined. And I had the yoga background from when I was 4. So it wasn't a complete, starting from complete scratch, but starting, just moving in a different area, working my body in a new way. I had to catch up. And so my strategy for catching up was getting in the studio, whether it's the gym, the training room, an hour before everyone else. If everyone came in at 8, I'd come in at 7. If we were finishing at 6, I'd stay till 8. And I figured if I put in those extra hours, I would make up that time. And what happened was that I started, it actually did. I thought that everybody would be doing this. Well, it turns out I was wrong. I was the only person who was putting in those extra hours.
Really?
And those days after days, weeks, months of additional training clocked up. And soon after, I was getting these opportunities that other people weren't getting. And I realized it was because there's no traffic on the extra mile.
No traffic on the extra mile.
It's like how are you going to do that those additional steps, that additional work that other people aren't willing to do to get results that other people won't get. And in business, the most successful, and this is my experience, the most successful leaders are the ones they're doing the work behind the scenes. I mean, they look like they're getting the rewards, that theory of the overnight success, but it's a myth. It takes years to build up to a level where your business is incredibly successful. It's such a culmination of skills, of experiences, of bringing people together, so many little nuances, and it's willing to put in those hours and put in the time to build that organization, that empire, so that people look at it and go, wow, this is something that has longevity that I want to be a part of.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I want to ask a follow-on question to that, because you work with a wide range of CEOs. Is there a conversation along those lines amongst high performers? Do they talk about what they're doing behind the scenes or ask each other about that?
All the time. All the time. So,
that's a very different conversation from what most people have.
Sure. So one of the distinct differences that I've discovered is just being around athletes all the time. They're constantly seeking to improve, seeking to get better. And so they're hungry for coaching. And that's a distinction that I use all the time in my training. And and I know that you're familiar with it, because it's just, it's that difference between, I'm good. I already know everything I need to know to be able to run a successful business, versus what else? How can I improve? What's that tiny little thing that I can do differently? It's those inches that make the difference. And in sports, we know that so clearly, because it's the inches that make the difference. Make the difference between a gold medalist and someone who's silver. And nobody remembers, unfortunately, the silver or the bronze winners, but we all remember the gold. And it's those tiny little things that they did differently. And athletes are continuously asking, and some of the best business leaders, most successful leaders I know, are constantly daring to put themselves into take themselves out of their comfort zone to say, how can I do this differently? How can I be better? How can I improve?
Sure. And so it sounds like that's really one of the core mindsets or core skills that leaders need to have. What are some of the other insights that you've gained in terms of what today's business leaders need to have in order to be successful?
I would say self-awareness is definitely one thing. I think it's very difficult to lead other people until you're really clear about who you are and what you're able to bring to the table. And that's constantly changing. The ability to retain and develop talent, to build a championship team. And that requires great relationship building. It requires being able to have work with different personalities and how to leverage people's strengths and really bring out the best in people. being able to lead change, to have that agility and flexibility, to see what's happening in the marketplace, to see what's coming 5 years, 10 years from now, and be able to meet that need. Having that mobility to just not fight yesterday's war, if you will.
Well, and I want to ask about the leading change. That's been a theme for me as well. You seem to view that as distinctly different than leading under normal circumstances, if there is such a thing as normal circumstances.
I'm not sure what you mean by leading under normal circumstances, but leading change for me is about thinking ahead. It's about just innovating, but actually thinking, what does our world, what does the planet need? What does my industry need? Not just today or tomorrow, but beyond that. And beyond just building a product or a service, how am I creating change in a way that's really serving, supporting, uplifting humanity? I believe that businesses have an obligation and a commitment to not just make a ton of money. I think that should be our baseline. Unfortunately, that's not the case, but I think it needs to be our baseline, and we need to look beyond that and say, what value are we creating in the community or in the world at large?
Sure. How are we going about making a profit, and what are we doing about legacy issues?
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely. No, and thank you for that clarity on leading change. It's a phrase that comes up from time to time. It's good to hear clarity on, well, what are we really talking about when saying leading change?
So, and I think there is a difference. I'm for people who are in the startup stage versus the mature companies, are going to be different differences in what they're going to be focused on. If you're a startup, you are going to be focused on cash flow. Without that, you don't have a business. Without revenue and the ability to be self-sustaining, you don't have a business. So yes, be focusing on that. But I think that we can be resourceful. Young entrepreneurs can be a lot more resourceful in solving problems, creating market differentiation in a way and because they have that agility that big businesses don't have. For the mature enterprises, I think that who are already making profit, it's like, let's look at how we're treating our employees. They look at the people that are supporting or hindering the growth of our organization. Looking at if the organization's changing, it's dealing with fast growth, or it's downsizing, if it's moving in a different direction, like being more strategic in our systems, our processes, and our teams, so that we're able to survive not just for the next 2 years, but for the next 20.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Not just the next 2 years, but the next 20. Not the next quarter, but the next 20 years.
Right. Not next quarter, but the next quarter century.
Even better. Next quarter. I had a client a number of years ago. There was a Japanese company, and when we did our outbrief after the consulting engagement that I did with them, we talked about what their future vision was for their company, and they were talking about how they wanted to be viewed 400 years in the future. Mm-hmm. It was an astounding and eye-opening conversation to have. Do you find more people, either within the United States or outside the United States, that have that longer-term perspective, or is that more inherent culturally in some regions than others?
I don't know. Yes and no. I think there are some companies that, IBM springs to mind as a company who've for the last 100 years, they've gone through so many different changes in the world around them. Technology has changed, everything, the industry has changed, but yet they've stayed clear to their core message, which is, we're consistent, we're steady, we deliver no matter what. And so they've survived. But I don't think all companies do that naturally. I think that there's so much pressure to meet financial deadlines for the next 3 months, or to satisfy our stakeholders. And so we're looking to just meet targets that are short term. And there are companies that do exceedingly well. I think Southwest is another great modern example of a company that looks long term. They're looking at how do we implement steady growth that is strategic, that it's, they'll open up in, 2 new cities a year, for example. Versus hey, 20, let's open 25, let's go for growth, let's open in 25 countries, and then all of a sudden they get this huge spike in growth, which is very difficult to sustain or maintain. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of companies deal with, is just looking at how can we grow based on last year versus the 20-mile march. Let's just slow, incremental progress, and the slow and steady wins the race. I found that time and time and again, but no, not all companies follow that path.
Well, and we saw that with Tesco coming into which is very big in the UK, coming into the US grocery market with the Fresh and Easy brand. Mm-hmm. And watched them. It was one of our family's favorite stores when it first started out. Then all of a sudden, they went Starbucks. And my wife and I talk business a lot of times over dinner, and we're looking at that going, this isn't good. And sure enough, they did that. They went for the growth and ended up failing epically. We had an opportunity to interview the CFO that they brought in to help work that out. And it was just a tragic story of how a great idea went radically wrong by attempting to focus on growth as opposed to much more organic growth.
Right. So that's one of the lessons that when I'm delivering trainings or coaching to CEOs or doing group trainings for their businesses or organizations, it's a key principle that I seek to ingrain in them. And one of the ways that we do that is through experiential training. We put people into this pressure cooker environment where they're learning these skills through games. So they get the experience of what it's like to build a business in a 3-hour period, but that 3-hour period shows them the growth. It sort of mirrors what would happen over 3 years. And so they learn these incredible lessons of if this is their default and they're spearheading growth, incredible growth, in one quarter, they see the impact of what it does to their teams, what it does to their finances. They see the chaos right there and there, and in that, and they realize, wait a second, I can make a different decision. And they go out into their businesses, and all of a sudden, they're making healthier choices for their organization.
Yes, absolutely. Now, and is that style of pressure cooker, as you called it, is that the driver behind how you help upskill CEOs? Because you talked a lot about what they need to have. Is that the way of helping them really up their game?
So I love it's called experiential training. Learn through experience. So I love, aside from individual coaching, or we'll do sort of assessments and things that are more traditional in the leadership training space.
Okay.
But I love the experiential training, the games-based training, because Plato said, you learn more about someone in an hour of play than a year of conversation. So we learn.
That's powerful and true.
Yes. So we learn through, I teach the processes through playing, through games, because the lessons sink in deep. If I just tell somebody, here are the 10 steps you need to follow, the chances are they're not going to take the steps. They're not going to make any changes because nothing has changed within them on a sort of soul level, on a DNA level. But when we put them in a game-based environment where they're actually, there's a lot of pressure on them, that pressure will reveal what their default course of action is going to be. And then they get right up, they're literally face to face with their stuff, with all the stuff that challenges them, whether it's a personality,
oh my gosh,
with people, whether it's how they manage their finances, whether it's where to prioritize. And it's a great way for people to see immediately, to get feedback on how they are leading and to make changes in a very safe space and in a cost-effective way, because you go out and make those kind of decisions and mistakes in your business, and it costs organizations thousands, millions of dollars.
Oh, yes. And jobs. It just has a huge impact.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Playing that out outside the training room. So it's awesome to be able to do that inside. Now, does that compressed time frame also help draw out a lot of lessons that get missed when things play out over longer time frames? Because sometimes it sounds like what you're doing in the training room, it's in that experiential training game, is something that would normally take years to play out in their businesses. So does that help them really get a different perspective?
So it does several things. One, it allows them to learn much more about themselves than they might. So typically, if you say to a business owner, do you believe in collaborate? I'm just giving this example, one example.
Sure.
Do you believe in collaboration? Do you believe in working together to create, to build businesses, to create a better world for everyone? Most people are going to say yes, of course. But when you get into a situation where you've got people that are taking resources from you, when they're wanting to one-up you, when they're looking to push you, trample on you, it's like, let's squash. They've got a mindset of let's squash the competition. Let's do whatever it takes, even if it's going to create a bloodbath in the process, so that we can be number one. When you've got somebody who's coming across that, our default might be to just retaliate and go into an eye for an eye, and then we hold this entire bloodbath. And it's only when we're right up against that pressure scenario, and somebody has really pulled the daggers on us and said, "Hey, you know what? You make this decision that you don't feel comfortable about with, or you end up losing all this money, or these people are gonna, whatever it is." And you're right up, you've got your back up against the wall. Well, unless you've had that experience, the chances are you're going to go to whatever's what your default is, which is most likely coming from a place of fear.
Yes, because it's very easy to talk about creating a collaborative environment, particularly with respect to competition. It's very, very different to put that into practice.
Right. But when when they get this experience, and they actually get to see what happens when they make those choices, so they get to see in a short period of time, whether it's half a day or a full day, how these different scenarios pan out, and they get to see, wait a second, when I do work with my competitors to solve this problem, what actually is the result as bad as I thought, or is it something really great? Like, how do we do that in a way that's successful? And they get to play these different scenarios out, and they're constantly, there's a feedback mechanism that we build in so that people are communicating, sharing with each other the lessons that they've learned. So it's a really powerful environment for people to learn about leadership, to learn about business without making expensive mistakes.
A very powerful training experience to be able to do that. Now, let me ask this, because how do you take that so skillfully across different industries, different business sectors?
So I just wrapped up a training this past weekend. We had people from banking, from investment, from healthcare. So we had Wells Fargo, we had Nevada State Bank, St. Rose Dominican Hospitals, Levi Strauss Retail, nonprofits, Opportunity Village. And you had these CEOs, top leaders from these different organizations come together in a room for several days. And everyone's got different skill, everyone's got a different background. One of the great things about these processes is that, one, it doesn't matter what your experience level is as a leader, there's always room for growth. And having these different sectors come together, all of a sudden, they're learning from each other. It almost becomes like a mastermind. One of the tragedies, I think, of business is that we tend to stay around people that think exactly the same way as us. And so being able to train leaders across multiple sectors comes from having the experience I've had of working in the political and the government sector, some of the UN work that I've done in peace leadership and conflict resolution. I've got that to bring to the table. Working with entrepreneurs in business, in tech, in finance, I bring that to the table. The people that I've worked in arts and entertainment, Celine Dion, Wayne Brady, set to say, I can bring that awareness to the table. So there's all these different sectors, is bringing that all together, then bringing these organizations from different industries together so that they're getting a whole range of different perspectives from their peers. And then on top of that, the training that we do allows them to tap into different styles of leadership. So the games are based on allowing them to understand what leadership means from a monarch's perspective, from an advocate, from a servant perspective, from a stage, from a rock star perspective. Like, how do you look at all these different styles of leadership, and what can we learn from these styles that we can now implement into our business? So it's an incredible melting pot, if you will, of ideas, of synergies, of styles that people can learn and grow from, that they can just take into their business and say, okay, here's what I can do differently.
Well, that seems to mix two concepts as well. The concept of 360-degree reviews, as well as being in the other person's shoes. So you get a chance to actually experience how does that feel, using different leadership approaches and leadership styles from both the being on the leadership side and being on the receiving end of it.
Absolutely. So one of the issues that came up, or I won't call it an issue, but the subjects that came around during this past retreat that I led was around identity, and how very much we tend to limit ourselves based on how other people perceive us, what our job is, what our role is. And although that might have given us a lot of strength, it becomes a limiting factor as well. So how can we just stretch outside of those to tap into, just like you said, how different styles so that they add to how we show up as leaders and how we show up as human beings in our life.
Mm-hmm. Wow. You have like 5,000 things triggered in the back of my mind right now around that whole experience. What's some of the feedback that comes from those CEOs that are experiencing that? It seems like this, putting them in that type of environment is very, to put it mildly, challenging. Yes.
Yeah, it's very challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding. We have people who just said, in 12 years or in 15 years, however long they've been leading, they've not had an experience where they're that engaged, where they learned something beyond, here are some 10 steps. It was really like cellular level changing. And I love that experience that people, we had a CEO from one of the hospitals who just talked about the fact that she's a phenomenal leader. She's a CEO who, absolutely kicks ass, if I can say, in the world. And she's learning how to relate and connect with her organization and her team better. She's learning presentation skills, how to show up more powerfully when she's giving keynotes and speeches. So there's so many skills that they're learning because most of us were skilled in one particular area. So this is an opportunity for us to really push the envelope in so many areas, from presentation skills to influence and impact, to presence, to team building, to conflict resolution, to sales and negotiation. All these areas that we can up the ante in what we're doing in.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Leena, we have a quick commercial break that we're going to go to, and we'll be right back. Entrepreneurs, don't go away. We're going to stop for a commercial break, and we're going to be right back with Leena Patel and more leadership insights for her phenomenal work with groups of CEOs. We'll be right back after this.
Adventure CEO Leadership Insights with Jeffrey Wolfe. We'll be back right after this.
Do you want your business to stand out from your competitors? Do you want to compete with the big brands? The answer to that is yes. It better be. What do you think would happen if an industry leader wrote the intro to your book? Or one of the Kardashians took a selfie with your product? Yes, it would change your business forever. Businesses have been using celebrities to endorse their products for years. It's incredibly effective. It used to be that the only way to reach your target market en masse was with television and a huge budget. But now with social media, you can reach your market quickly and easily. If you're thinking, hey, that's great, but I can't afford to do that, well, you better think again. You can't afford not to do this. To find out what celebrity wants to work with your brand, go to internetdominators.com/celebrity and fill out our celebrity match form. Do it now.
What's Your Story? With Louis DiBianco is live Saturdays at noon Eastern on RadiostarWorldwide.com. Louis will help you discover, unleash, and share your personal and business stories. If you want to add value to your life and business, start by discovering your unique personal and business story. For fun, profit, and an awesome life, start your own story with Louis DiBianco every Saturday at noon Eastern or anytime 24/7 on RadiostarWorldwide.com. What's your story? You're listening to Jeffrey Wolfe and Adventure CEO Leadership Insights. And now, back to Jeffrey.
Welcome back, entrepreneurs. We're here with Leena Patel, the world's #1 in global impact systems. Leena, thank you so much again for being with us. This has been just packed with insights and lessons from the work you're doing with CEOs and high achievers around the world. Could you share one or two insights that you've gained through working with elite performers?
Yes, I'd love to. So we actually tapped on this before the break, and I'm going to go into this more detail because I love this distinction. Mm-hmm. It's hungry for coaching and about constantly asking, how can you get better? It's those little distinctions that separate the leaders from the laggards. It's this drive and this compulsion, this obsession to raise their level. And, I'm going to challenge leaders and CEOs, anyone who's listening to this right now, to really work on looking at areas of your life that you can raise your level. whether it's leadership, whether it's accountability. Get a coach, get a mentor on board that can support you, that can look for that can see the blind spots that you're not seeing. My grandfather used to say, behind every leader is another great leader. And, Oprah, she had Barbara Walters, Warren Buffett had Benjamin Graham, Alexander the Great had Aristotle. I had my grandfather had Gandhi. It's just whoever, and not be limited to just even one person. Because I think one of the great things that, is we can learn from different people. Everyone's got different skills and different strengths as leaders. So creating that sort of mastermind team around us of great mentors is invaluable to success.
Yes, and you say mentors plural, so that applies to perhaps specific areas. But has your experience also been that high performers, really impactful leaders, have a team of great leaders behind them?
In my experience, I don't like to limit myself to one. I mean, I have business mentors that I turn to for ongoing support in my business, but I also have specific even within that sort of overall business arc. I've got people when it comes to sort of media and PR and who've got that specialty that I turn to. I've got when it comes to my health and my well-being, I've got somebody that I can turn to. When it comes to my spiritual growth and my evolution in that area, I've got somebody I can turn to. So having those people that have those, that have that special skill to be able to turn to is really invaluable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's powerful. Behind every great leader is another great leader.
The other thing I would say, Jeffrey, is just when you're talking about skills that I've learned from elite performers, one of the things they do really well that I've implemented into my business and now I support other people with is tracking progress, is monitoring it, having accountability. I think one of the challenges that business, where areas where business leaders can really step it up is creating systems in place where they're actually able to monitor how well they're doing and where they can step it up, and doing that not only just on a here's my system, here's a technical level, but on an individual level, on a personal level as well. Having every single person, if you've got every single person in your team, having a system for tracking how they're doing, the results they're doing, how they're showing up, how they're lining up with company core values, how it's reflecting in their behavior, their actions, their languaging, the sales they're making, all of that, it escalates the results so much more than without that.
And that sounds like you're implementing what, because Jim Collins in his follow-up to Good to Great, his Good to Great in the social sector monograph, really put a fine point on measurements like you're talking about. And one of the things that he really hit on was, don't measure what's convenient, measure what is and we can't directly measure that as an excuse. You can't put a yardstick on it and say, okay, it's 6. At the very least, pick what actually gives you an accurate reflection of what you're attempting to achieve. And if you can't directly measure it, make sure that you approach it like a lawyer so you can build the case. If somebody challenged you on it, could you present the evidence to go, yes, here's where we're getting better, getting worse, and the same on that.
Right. It's incredible, that level of specificity when you've got the ability to just, I had this visual in my head of a CEO that was having his team around at a board meeting, and he was asking them numbers on sales, and you'd get some people who are like, oh, I think it was around 5.5, 5,000, and then you'd have other people who are like 4,328. They knew it down to the minuscule number, and it's that level of detail. When we know our numbers inside out, that's when we're tracking it at that level, that's when we can really go, great, here are the little changes that we can make. But without that knowledge of what our sales are, what our numbers are, we can't make those changes. It's really knowing it and having a system for that in place.
Yes, indeed. And to make sure that it's relevant, but also that it's real specificity. I started my career in statistics, and some things that I see were very specific looking numbers are being thrown around at times, but there's no proper context to it from a measurement standpoint. And the precision of it goes to a point where we're going, oh my gosh, to get that level, to get four decimal points of precision to a number becomes meaningless and misses the larger point of what the numbers are measuring and telling the people that have them.
So it's a balance. We want to have that level of detail, because that detail is what gives us really valuable information on how we can improve. But
yes.
But the great, with leadership, it's always the balance of being able to have the detail, that level of how do you the minuscule, but also be able to scale it up to the macro and get the overview and say, okay, right, in the large scheme of things, what matters? What's the vision? Where is our company going? What direction is it going on? If we get so caught up in the detail that we're missing that big picture that is inspiring people to come into work every day, well, then that's not in our best interest either. So it's having that skill to be able to flip-flop between big picture vision and then the tiniest of details.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, in sales, the sales example that you used is excellent, because that's something where it can be measured down to the nearest dollar. It's relevant, it's doable, it doesn't lose, it's not giving a false sense of precision. It's actually knowing something that can be known. So that was just, with the false precision that I see on some things, it's like you can't really, for one thing, they really couldn't measure it to that level of detail. It's just an estimate, and again, it gets off track from the point. The accounting systems in some big corporations, we're seeing in the bowels of how they run the numbers. Like, well, we plug that. It's like, well, but that's $500,000. Well, yeah, that's small. It's not material as a percentage. It's like, yeah, but that comes straight out of the profit margin, because they don't have that context. Mm-hmm. As you're saying, it's knowing what's the bigger picture and how does that fit in. It's like, was taught what we call the Luftig paycheck test early in my career. So look, if the monetary impact of that decision is okay to deduct from your paycheck, let's go ahead. If the answer is yes, let's move forward with it. If the answer is no, let's step back and take a look at how we can do that different.
Yes, exactly.
So what are some of the other insights that you've gained from working with high performers? Is there another one you can?
So there's been a range, and going back to what I said about different leaders, different people in my immediate environment, and then people that I've studied that I haven't had immediate contact with, but just there's such a vast range of lessons. I mean, I'll talk about, I think Celine Dion actually springs to mind right now, so I'll talk about her. One of the things, several things I've learned from her, apart from the commitment of just being absolutely present with whoever's around you, is she's built an incredible team around her of loyal employees, raving fans, people who just love working for her because of who she is and the way she treats people like family. So that's one thing I would just say, just being able to manage your team. I think people, there's a distinction I like, that that management trumps product or service. You can have a great leader and the product may be not that great, the service may not be that great, but that great leader can turn that company around because of who he is or she is, and because of the people that are on board. And I think it's the people. Sometimes people forget this, but it's the people that make the organization, and how we treat them and how we engage and interact with them what makes the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is so true. And it is so sad that it's forgotten or gets ground out in the day-to-day operations.
I've coached several leaders. Actually, just one in the recent past that springs to mind, who's talking to me about how skilled he is in what he does, but not being valued in his organization, not recognized for the innovation or the ideas or the strengths that he brings, and just feeling so belittled that he's now looking to move. And it's a tragedy when you see people who are not being really valued in an organization, that becomes just about a paycheck. And I think that really comes down to leadership and management, where it's really creating a space, a safe, judgment-free space for people to share ideas, to give their input and let them know it's valued. There's the leaders and the managers who are, this is my way, it's only going to be done this way, or micromanaging, are the ones that are just really struggling right now. Those are the ones that are really struggling. So creating that environment that people really celebrate and support employee innovation.
And the impact of that is massive. I experienced being on a team like that, my first job in industry, and I continue to learn from that experience to this day, and kept in touch over the years with the gentleman that led that team, and watched his career flourish as he's moved up in the ranks in business as well. So that it has a huge impact on the business and on the arcs of the lives and careers of the people that get to experience that kind of a high performance environment.
Yeah. And then
So,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'll say another thing that springs to mind that I've learned is about just the art. I would say it's an art, the art of vulnerability, the art of openness. I think one of the challenges as leaders, as CEOs, the more successful you become, the more difficult it is to show who you are on a human level. You don't want to show that you're making mistakes because somehow it makes you appear weak, or someone can take advantage of you, or you don't know what you're doing. There's so much of that kind of fear around, and I feel like we need to really shift that mentality of it's okay to make mistakes. Feedback is fuel. It's a good thing. If we're making mistakes, it means that we're actually taking risks and challenging ourselves. And if we're not, then really, where's our organization going? And so I think just to shift our mindset around allowing ourselves to be open, to share our humanity, to show our humanness. I feel like we're missing that on a lot of levels. And we look at, if you look at what's going on in the political world right now, it's like if we're not allowed, it becomes about how strong you can be. And if you make a mistake, you're blaming somebody else for the mistake instead of saying, here, I'm human. I did this. I'm just as susceptible to mistakes as you are.
Sure. And we see it in political discourse, but in other aspects of life, it's become all too prevalent. This whole zero tolerance mindset, where it's like one mistake and that's it. It's all over. I feel sorry for kids growing up today, because in a lot of ways, particularly with the advent of social media and whatnot, there's too many things that can be one goof that should be a powerful learning experience on their path to becoming an adult ends up branding them for life and limiting their options.
I think the only thing for me, it's about when we put ourselves into a training environment where we're reminded that here, let's create this safe space where you can screw up, where you can mistakes, where people aren't going to judge you, where you're allowed to test the limits, where you're allowed to fall down. And then as much as possible, I encourage people to say, hey, build that community of people around you that are going to celebrate your successes, that are going to cheer you on, that you can go to for feedback, or you can go and say, here, here's what happened, and here's what I learned from this, and they're gonna have your back. And I find a lot of CEOs, a lot of leaders feel alone a lot of the time. They have their people who've got those, who are cheering them and celebrating them, but they're not showing their own humanity, and they're not showing that they're, and that's that vulnerability that we're able to show is what enables us to connect with our followers and our fans and the people that are buying our products. When they see that we've got a heart, we've got their best interests, they're going to look at us and go, hey, you know what? This is somebody I really want to get behind. And having that confidence to be able to step forward and show that side to us and show how to do that, I think, is a real skill. So one of the things I do, just to sidetrack that a little bit, but we teach leaders how to share a story, how to storytell, how their business came to light, how what their personal story and their personal journey to being in the role, and we teach them, we give them a framework and a strategy for sharing that story so that they can build that connection with their customers, their suppliers, their clients, with their team, because a lot of people don't. One of the things I had a customer, a client of mine who works for a bank, Wells Fargo, and last week he said to me, Leena, I can tell stories about my business all day long, but I don't share about myself. That's common. That's a common thing I hear very often amongst leaders. They're not used to talking about themselves, especially on a deeply personal or intimate level. And so one of the ways that I support them and help them is to give them the space and the confidence to actually open up that side to themselves and figure out how they can storytell journey in a way that can build deeper relationships with their audience.
Yes. And through that work with you, does that then put them in a position where they're more effective and more open to taking that back into their business and creating that opportunity for other people to be vulnerable as well?
I think that happens as a natural default. As soon as you share your humanity, as soon as you share your weaknesses, it gives permission for other people to do the same.
What a powerful shift in perspective. I wanted to ask about your experience with having done business in the UK and in Europe and in the United States. So working internationally, how's that affected how you think about your business and the role of business?
In so many different ways, I would say. So looking back and I've been had my own business for 20 years now. I'd say looking back, I was so anxious, in the early days to travel and to see the world, and that was one of my callings was to travel as much as possible. So I did, and I would say for young businesses now, establish a really strong, solid foundation in one country before you open up in another country, because the cost, the time investment, the drain on your resources is incredible. So if you're just starting out, really build that foundation before you open up. One of the benefits now, I would say, of just having those experiences in, whether it's Asia, whether it's Europe, Canada, US, you see how people bring who they are, the different cultural experiences, and how they bring that to business. And to be able to have that flexibility and malleability to connect with people in different ways comes from that, from traveling and have seen the world so much. So, here's an example, in the Far East, when you're doing business with them, they want to spend time getting to know you. They're going to take you out for dinner. They're going to get to know about your family. They want to spend days getting to know you before they even talk about business. In the US, you go for a meeting and it's straight down to business. So having awareness of how people engage differently allows you to be more flexible and fluid when you're dealing with people. It's a crucial skill, especially as we're getting more global.
And hopefully in the U.S. we'll build more of a habit of doing some of that connection first before diving into the business, because it seems that it sets the table for having a much more effective business conversation.
I think it's challenging. I think it's definitely an area where companies could do with more training and learning how to engage with leaders from different cultural backgrounds, employees from different cultural backgrounds, how to actually bring that diversity and make it a strength in the organization.
We've just got a few minutes left, and there's one question I want to make sure we have adequate time for, because of all the work you've done, the breadth of your background. And it's this: what do you view business's role should be in promoting social responsibility and good governance around the world?
It's critical. I feel like we're living at a time now where there's so many challenges going on in the world, and we have a responsibility. We have incredible power as entrepreneurs, as leaders, and as business owners to not just create a product or a service, but to something that has some lasting impact. So if we can leverage our strengths to be able to support our community, local level, national level, we're in a much better position. I don't know if you've got time. I can give you a real quick example of a company.
Oh, please.
Successfully. UPS, when Haiti was going through their earthquake in 2009, their system for getting food and supplies to people was they'd have a name on a handwritten card of the family that would get this food. And so there'd be a lot of fraud going on with people taking other people's resources. UPS employee discovered this, and they used their proprietary tool called a UPS trackpad to be able to create these identity cards. So each family had this identity card, and they eliminated theft, and something that basically cost the organization a couple of $1,000s to create.
Wow.
Had the resources in-house, and one person's imagination basically had as great as an impact as $1 million in contribution made to relief. So those kinds of things that we can do as individuals to help out other companies, other groups of people in need. Just by having one skill set, we can serve and support so many people.
Yes, and that's a great example of how entrepreneurial CEOs are in a position to really be perhaps the biggest force for good in the world. So we're coming up on a hard stop here in a couple of minutes. What are you working on next? What do you have going, and how can our listeners get in touch with you?
So I'm working with bringing corporations and nonprofits together. I deliver these trainings, whether it's personal coaching or group trainings, and my goal is to bring these organizations together to collaborate, get nonprofits, give them the business tools to get their message out there through skills and through training. I've also created a partnership with a company where we can allow these nonprofits to receive donations month after month at a very low cost. We've partnered with Constant Contact, Groupon, Restaurant.com, some incredible businesses, so that the people that are donating are not only supporting companies they believe in, but they're getting incredible discounts when they eat at various restaurants. They get training from me every month for every donation they make in business skills and personal development skills, tools that are going to help them be more successful in their business. And it's a really low cost entry point. It's like $25 a month is the starting point. So we're putting this program into place to help these nonprofits, to help corporations build their network by connecting with nonprofits and making more of an impact in the world. And for those of you, if you're interested in this, go to my website, please, www.leenapatel.net, LEENAPATEL.net, or globalimpactsystems.com. You just send me a message and say, hey, I'm interested in this program, and we'll connect with you. If you'd like a consultation on your business and how to step up and take it to the next level of go through training, again, just reach out to me and we'll get talking, and I'm happy to do that. A complimentary service. Just let me know that you heard me on this show.
Awesome. So that's www.leenapatel.net. That's Leena, Leena, Patel, Patel.net. That is awesome. We've got about 2 minutes left. Do you have any closing thoughts for the entrepreneurs listening?
To simply do the best that you can, to have that commitment to be bigger, better, brighter than you can possibly be. Let's sit back on our laurels and just imagine that what we've got is enough. Let's reach out. Let's build community. Let's find coaches and mentors. If it's not me, find somebody else that really resonates with you. But let's really build a community of people that are community of leaders that are going out and making an impact in the community, or whatever level that is. And and as individuals, feel that we've got some power within us to make a difference. That it's not just up to the world leaders, the presidents, so on and so forth. But on an individual level, how can I show up in the workforce to make more of a difference in people's lives? How can I be the best that I can possibly be? And I think when we come from that space of serving others and giving our best, opportunities come our way.
Yes, indeed. Very powerful. Leading from all levels. So there you have it, entrepreneurs. If you want to learn more about how you can be part of helping to give back to nonprofits, get access to Leena's training, or if you want to be part of her CEO training events that she hosts, get in touch with her at www.leenapatel.net. That's Leena, Leena, Patel, Patel.net. Leena, thank you so much for being with us today and staying for the full hour. I really appreciate that. You delivered so much for the entrepreneurs listening. It was just an incredible interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. My pleasure.
Entrepreneurs, don't go away. We have Petrelli Reviews coming up next with Dina Petrelli. And don't forget, our awesome show producer, Wendy West, has her show, Independent Artist Radio, on Fridays. You don't want to miss that. Thanks for being with us this week, and we'll talk with you next week. Go lead like crazy. And as Leena just said, remember, you can have a global impact. It's not about being big business, big profile. Your actions today have phenomenal impact on people's lives tomorrow. Jeffrey Wolfe signing off till next week.
Thanks for listening to Adventure CEO Leadership Insights with Jeffrey Wolfe. Listen live every Wednesday and anytime 24/7 on demand at RadiostarWorldwide.com.